When Volkswagen took charge of SEAT, the idea behind it was to turn the Spanish brand into a sort of Mediterranean Alfa Romeo. And on the whole, that sort of made sense, because if anyone has the same sort of passion and brio and vim as the Italians, well, it's probably going to be the Spanish. And on the whole, that worked, because their Go Faster models had the name Cupra attached to them. Now, Cupra came from the words Cup Racing, shortened, made Cupra. So that was the sort of the GTIs, the high performance version of the SEAT brand. But in 2018, they made the slightly odd decision to separate them and make Cupra a standalone brand. Has it worked? Well, here we are just 4 short years later at the launch of their third standalone product. And this time they're going all electric with this, the Cupra Born. Now, it's obviously based on the Volkswagen ID.3. So here's the big question. Is it just a rebadged ID.3, or does the Born have its own identity? See what I did there? Born. I did. Anyway, welcome to the wilds of Essex. Welcome to the brand new Cupra Born. And as always, welcome to AutoEV. Now, before we go on to this week's road test review of the new Cupra Born, it is of course that time when I may ask you to make sure you subscribe to the AutoEV channel. And when you are, press the little bell button that's down there, because then that way you'll receive notification of when our next video goes live. If you can also give the videos a bit of a thumbs up and leave us some comments, good or bad, let us know how we're doing, that'd be appreciated as well. Now, if you've been a supporter of the channel so far, thank you ever so much. And if you're new to us and you kind of like what we're doing, maybe consider becoming one. Now let's talk about this car, because I've been looking forward to driving this, because it's part of Volkswagen's group's strive to go all electric. And of course it's spun off its MEB platform. Now, Volkswagen Group are pretty much the kings of platform sharing, and we've already seen cars from them, such as the ID.3, ID.4 and ID.5 from Volkswagen, not to mention the brand new ID Buzz. And then from its sister brands, such as Skoda, we've had the Enyaq and Enyaq Coupe, and then of course from Audi, we've had the Q4 e-tron. This is Cupra's version of it, and it is a little bit, well, it pretty much looks like an ID.3 that's just got a new face on it. So is it got enough to make it stand apart and make us really take notice of the Spanish brand? Well, Cupra's sales have been increasing in the UK since its launch back in 2018, and they're pinning an awful lot of hopes on this new all-electric Born. Is it going to be any good? Well, let's stick it through an AutoEV road test and find out. Okay, let's start with styling as usual, and this is going to be a really important thing for Cupra, because they need to make it really stand apart from the ID.3, because it's obviously based on that car. Have they done a good enough job? I think they have. I think this car really stands apart from the ID.3, and I don't think you can, although there is a familiarity with it, I don't think you get the two of them mixed up. Now, Cupra have got this kind of bronze coppery thing going on, and this weird kind of transformer badge that they've got on the front, and it's big, it's bold, it lays out its intent. Now, this is the kind of launch colour, this kind of blue colour, and I think with that and the kind of bronze badging and trim, I think it really works. You've got this nice kind of little Cupra badging down there, and again this big bold copper kind of splitter on the front, and the whole front of the car is a sort of angry kind of Pokemon look to it. So yeah, it's starting to lay the foundations to be a great looking hot hatch. But it's in its side profile at a quick glance where you're probably most likely to, well, you'd be forgiven for thinking it is just an ID.3 if it drove past you relatively quickly. There's not a lot of huge difference between the two. Now, they're 5-door only, that's all they're coming in, is just 5 doors like the ID.3. But Cupra, they've put their own mark on it. Now, we'll get on to trim levels later, but effectively there are 3. V1, V2 and V3. This particular press car I've got is a V3, and it's riding on these quite nice 20-inch alloy wheels that are kind of aero. They've got these kind of sections in the side just to help airflow and obviously help with the range. But the V1 will come on 18 inches as standard, and then V2 and V3 will get 19s as standard with the 20-inch option. Got a nice kind of deep side sill down there where it's kind of sculpted in, quite like this little bit at the back. A little bit of a nod to kind of some aero there. Don't think it would do much personally. And then you've got this kind of mottled sort of like bit of trim here that's quite nice and a bit distinctive. But as I say, from the side profile, that's where you can see most of the resemblance to the ID.3. But as you come around the back, like the front, it starts to gain its own identity again. Now it shares this big, well, really big roof spoiler with the ID.3 to help with the airflow, and of course these infills at the side, which is quite nice. And then of course it shares a lot of family resemblance to the other Cupra models, the Ateca and the Fermenta, with having this kind of nice big kind of light bar that goes across the back and these kind of nice kind of standout sharp edged lights here. You get your nice big bold Cupra badge here in the centre. It's carbon fibre, decorated, and of course that doubles as the boot release, and of course the lovely big bronzed Cupra logo lettering across the back. Nice kind of aggressive looking rear diffuser as well. No fake carbon fibre down here, which is quite nice to see. On the whole, I think this is a really good looking car. I mean, not a timeless piece of design, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a great effort, and I think it's much more interesting and far more kind of standout way than the ID.3 on which it's based. But what do you think? As always, let us know in the comments down below. Now in terms of practicality, what are we looking at? Well, pretty much the same as the ID.3, which is to say 385 litres of boot space. I don't have my suitcases with me today because we're on the UK press launch, and if I turned up with 4 suitcases that would just be, well, weird. Anyway, it's enough space, you know, for the type of car that it is for a family car. You also get the split folding rear seat, so a 60-40 split, and also with a load through hatch as well through the centre for longer items, so that's ideal. A couple of hooks up either side there for hanging bags on, and you do get some underfloor storage. There's a little trough right at the back where you put your cable in as well, so that's pretty much ideal. And it's a decent shaped boot as well, it's fairly square. So on the whole, practicality is good. What's it like in the back? Well, again, like the boot, pretty much like the ID.3, which is to say, it's all right. There's enough leg room, there's reasonable foot room. Again, my seat set for my own driving position, and I sit quite kind of low in the car, so a little bit tighter under the seat, but actually it's okay, I can still get my feet there. Decent headroom for me, but I would think if you're approaching on that 6 foot part, you're going to be quite tight on the headroom area, I would suggest. So from that point of view, that's the bit you're going to have to watch, is headroom if you're carrying taller people. In terms of the bench across the back, well, it's good. It's shaped enough for the outer two, but there's a relatively flat centre section for a third passenger. There's also a flat floor, so they've got foot room. There's 2 USB-C charging ports down in there. Storage is okay, it's not brilliant, it's all right. You've got mat pockets on the seat backs, and you've got deepish door bins. They're okay, they're not lined though, they're just kind of plasticky, which is the only downside with them. Fold down centre armrest, as I said, and of course you've got your load through facility if you need it from the boot point of view. You've got 2 cup holders in the centre here, which are all right, that's fine. There's a nice kind of comfort part of it. And then of course your ISOFIX points, well, they're nice and easy to get to because they're just covered here with these plastic covers, so pull them off and they're nice and easy. You don't have to keep ramming the sort of like the ISOFIX things through the seat. So yeah, on the whole, absolutely fine for the type of car that it is back here. There certainly feels to be enough space. The only part that might be lacking, as I say, if you're slightly taller, is headroom. Now, up front, what do we have? Well, there's, like the outside, some familiarity with the ID.3 and thankfully some individuality away from it as well. Let's start with what you're particularly faced with. So you've got this centre 12-inch infotainment screen here, and then a smaller 5-inch display which is in front of the driver. So, which is pretty much your instrument binnacle, which nicely, like the ID.3 and like the BMW i3, moves with the columns. Irrespective of your driving position, you get a good view of this. Now it contains information such as your speedo, your state of battery, your range left, your gear indication display, because the transmission lever's up here, this rotating thing here like the Volkswagen and the BMW, which is nice, I like that. You also get a very good head-up display as well. On the Cupra, which is nice. It's nice and easy, it's in your line of sight, and you also got augmented reality in terms of the sat nav, so overlays directions onto that, which is brilliant, works really well. You get some small ancillary buttons over here which are touch sensitive, so your lights, fog lights, rear screen defrost, front screen defrost, and then over on the door panel you've got, just like the ID.3, the 2 electric door window switches, and then you've got to press the button marked rear for the rear ones. Odd, but there you go. And then your mirror controls there, so that's all fine. Steering wheel's good, don't mind it, it's round, although it's got a slightly flat bottom, it's absolutely fine to hold. The downside, however, is they've used Volkswagen's infernal touch-sensitive controls on it. So you've got to do this, and there is a bit of feedback on it, but it's just not as nice as pressing an actual button, and it's too easy to kind of start hitting it with the heel of your hand as you're driving and change things. I don't like it, it's silly. Just give us a proper button, Volkswagen Group, please. But moving across here, that is the other downside as well. Again, it follows Volkswagen with having these infernal temperature controls which aren't backlit, which you slide your finger along just to make it work, and I don't get it, why we need to have it. Just do away with them. Thankfully, however, you can actually go into the screen to control your climate control system. So you go in there and you can actually control your fan speed there, heated steering wheel and such, and your air conditioning from there, but not the temperature. That's the only downside. You can't control the temperature from there. You've got to use these silly slider, touch-sensitive sliding things. Silly and unnecessary. However, the rest of this screen is much, much better than you get in the ID.3. It's much clearer, the clarity is good, it doesn't lag as much as the ID.3's does. It's so much nicer to use, and it's nice and easy to go into. So you've got your, I mean, we'll come on to driver modes later, but they're all in here. You can set them all up, which is quite nice. So your driver profiles are there. Your charging, you know, routines and how much you've got left, your range, that's all in there. That's easy to use. You get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, and as I say, the whole thing is just much nicer to use than what you actually get with the ID.3. It's a much clearer. It's not as laggy. It's nice and easy. I mean, obviously most people will probably end up just going down the route of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but that's fine. But on the whole, it's good. I just wish it didn't have these slider controls on it. Right, the rest of the cabin, really nicely executed. This plastic kind of trim here, maybe the only slightly downside, but it's not that infernal piano black that gets all dusty and covered in fingerprints, so that's okay. Good amount of storage. You get this nice big center console, which has got a nice kind of soft touch feel. It's like almost like a neoprene wetsuit material on it, and that's similar to what you get across the top of the dash here. So the quality feels a lot better than it does in the Volkswagen. Good storage, a couple of cup holders in there for your cups, so your water bottles, they slot in there nicely. Or there's a bit in door bins for those, and then there's a relatively kind of decent deep bin in there. I don't know if you've got things like, you know, the key or sunglasses or whatever, they can all fit in there. Moving back, we've got a wireless charging pad for your mobile and a decent centre storage box. Not huge, but it's all right. I mean, it's fairly deep, although not particularly wide, but again, enough for most things, for your polar mints or whatever. And that will slide forward to give you a bit more support on your arm there. Decent sized door bins, they'll take a good sized water bottle, although again not lined like the back, that's the only downside. Glove box is, well, pretty much taken up with a handbook, which is tiny, which pretty much says all you need to know about that. But the driving position is brilliant, I have to say. It's a really nice seat. You've got these lovely sports seats in the car as standard, and as I say, I do like the steering wheel itself, apart from the controls. It's nice to hold. Now, the seat material will depend obviously on trim level. The base cars, the V1s, get Sequal, which is a recycled cloth material that Fiat have used as well, but it uses recycled materials from the world's oceans. So that's good from a sustainability point of view. Higher trim levels like this get what's called Dynamica trim, which is very much like sort of like an Alcantara type material. So it holds you really well in place. You know, you don't slide around in the seat, and it has a really nice feel to it. And that's made from recycled polyester. So again, sustainability is very much key with Cupra, and that's nice to see. You get adjustment galore on it, so you've got this extending squab to give you more under thigh support. There's some nice shoulder support, fixed head restraints, which is fine. A good range of electric adjustment on this particular car. But as I say, it's easy to find a nice, comfortable driving position, and the whole thing just has a great feel about it. So let's summarise the interior of the Cupra Born. Better than the ID.3 for two main reasons. First of all, use of materials and the way they're fit and finished, and also the much better infotainment system that's fitted to it. The only downside is the fact that they've used the same sort of touch sensitive controls across it for some of the minor controls, but otherwise I can't really fault this. Now let's talk about batteries and range and motors, because there's going to be a bit of a choice, so bear with me here. Now this particular car I have is the 58 kilowatt hour battery with a 204 PS motor. Now we'll talk about performance later, but basically this is the one that Cupra say is going to be the big seller of all the Borns, and it's going to give a range of around about 263 miles according to WLTP figures. You will eventually be able to order it with a more powerful 231 PS motor, which will also be available with a 77 kilowatt hour battery, which will give a range of up to 335 miles. Or you can go lower with a smaller motor with a 45 kilowatt hour battery, which will give a WLTP range of around about 211 miles. But as I say, at the moment, this is what you can order, which is a 58 kilowatt hour battery with a 204 PS motor. Now, charging speeds on all of them will go up to 125 kilowatts, meaning you can go from a 5% charge to an 80% charge from a 125 kilowatt charger in around about 35 minutes, so the benchmark in other words. Cupra have also fitted it with an onboard 11 kilowatt charger as standard, meaning if you have that three-phase electricity at home with a more powerful 11 kilowatt wall box, then charging it up to full will be 6 hours 15 minutes. If it's the more likely 7 kilowatt wall box that you have at home, then charging it will probably be around about 11 hours. Now, all Borns are single motor, rear wheel drive, so it's mounted on the back axle. There are there's going to be three different power ratings. So this particular car I'm in, as I say, is going to be what Cupra say could be the best seller in the range, which is a 204 PS power rating with the 58 kilowatt hour battery. You will be able to specify it later this year with what they call an e-boost, which will take the power up to over 230 PS. You'll also be able to have that. You'll also be able to have a lower powered 150 PS model as well, but only with a smaller battery. So you've got to pick and choose which ones you're right. But as I say, this one is what Cupra say is going to be the big seller. So how does it feel out on the road? Well, on the whole, it feels really good. You can feel the massive difference between this and the ID.3. This is a much more planted car. Performance isn't massively different to it, in fairness. So, I mean, we're not talking about absolute outright speed. The 0 to 60 of this car is round about 7.5 seconds. So, as I say, not blisteringly fast, not maybe what you'd attribute with the Cupra brand. The more powerful 236 PS e-boost one is going to drop that below the 7-second bracket, only when it's fitted with this 58 kilowatt hour battery, because the bigger 77 kilowatt hour battery obviously weighs more. So the performance model will be the mid-level battery with the e-boost facility. But I'm digressing a little bit there. So it's sort of hot hatch from 5 years ago kind of feel. You know, Mark V Golf GTI kind of territory, not kind of Golf R or Cupra R as we were maybe being come to expect. But on the whole, it's nice. Now, there are different driving modes, obviously, as you get with most of these cars, and these are accessed via this screen here. So I go into that and I press the little car thing here, and it comes up with all the bits and pieces. And I've got driver profile, range, comfort, performance, and individual. So I've been kind of sticking with comfort and performance today, and if I'm being absolutely truthful about it, there's not a lot of difference, or it certainly doesn't feel that way. If I go into the performance section, yeah, there's a little bit more throttle response from kind of initial take up, but I wouldn't say it's night and day. It's okay, but as I say, don't be thinking it's going to be some kind of Golf R rival, because it most certainly isn't. But where it's perhaps lacking, and this is the bit that's I'm slightly disappointed with, it's sanitized. It doesn't feel like, I kind of wanted a real hot hatch feel to it. I wanted something I could take with the scruff of the neck and really, sort of like chuck it around. I wanted a lot more kind of dynamics from everything else. Yes, as I say, 0 to 60 is one thing, but we all know that electric cars are quite quick, 0 to 60. I wanted more feel from the steering. I wanted a little bit more dynamics in the chassis. Now, let me just go delve into that a bit deeper. The chassis has changed over, obviously, the ID.3. It is 15 mils lower at the front and 10 mil lower at the back, and you do feel a difference. It is a much more dynamic car than the ID.3, and I will now stop comparing it with that car. It is much more dynamic, and it is a dynamic drive to a point. It's okay. There is just something a bit, it feels like there's a kind of layer between me and the chassis. That's the only way I can sort of describe it. I feel like it's the steering, I'd like it to be a bit weightier. It feels quite light. It's not uncommunicative, you know where the wheels are, but I just kind of like a little bit more communication between me and the rest of the car. Now, the rear axle is a multi-link rear axle, so it quits itself very, very well on the twistier roads. It does really, really well down there, and it feels very composed. And I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. It feels very composed. It feels all in shape, and I'm not sure that a hot hatch, and importantly, a Cupra, should feel like that. I think there's an element of, I don't want to use the word danger, but I think there's an element just missing from it, an adjustability, a little bit where you just know where you've maybe reached the limits of it, and you just think, oh, I need to back off a bit. You don't quite get that here, and I think a lot of it is to do with, kind of, as I say, the steering does feel quite light. So I think for me, it's just that last 5% missing, and that's it. Now, the rest of the car, the brakes are good, the brakes are fine. There's a tiny little bit of, and I do mean a millimetre or two of deadness just as you first start, but then they start to bite, and they bite well. You can go into a brake regeneration like you can with the other MEB cars by flicking into the B mode, and that gives it pulls up quite nice then. I'd like a bit more adjustability on the regen, but I could attribute that across all of the Volkswagen Group cars. I like, like the Kia and the Hyundai, where you can, use the paddles and you can really ramp it right up or take it right off. This is just kind of, that's it. You can take it off, you can have it on or you can have it off. But it's okay, it's fine. And as I say, the feel from the brake itself is fine. Bit more positive news, if you think I'm being down on the car, I'm not. It is good. The one thing I will say about the car is how comfortable it is. It's a really comfortable car. I was quite surprised actually how good it is, especially on these big 20-inch wheels. It acquits itself really, really well with any sort of change in surface, potholes. I mean, we're going down this road here where I've got sort of like speed bumps, and the car doesn't jar across them at all. It's really nice. It's got a real nice compliancy to the dampers, and it's nice. I like that. It's good, and I think if anything, that's the bit that's really surprised me, is how compliant the car is, and it's quiet. Again, it's a car that if you were doing long journeys in it, of course, with the bigger battery, the longer range, it's going to do it. It will do it really, really well. You'll be very comfortable in this. The driving position is excellent. As I said before, the seats are superb. Really, really like the seats in this. And as I say, this Dynamica trim material that just kind of, it's like Alcantara, it just kind of grips you and holds you in the seat. That's lovely, really like that. The steering wheel, as I say, is mostly round. It's just got a tiny bit of the flat bottom, which is good enough. It's got a nice diameter, it's not too thick, it's got a nice, you know, feel to it. And all the ancillary controls and dials and what you can see from the driver's point of view is excellent. So the driving position is very, very good. So as I say, it's just really that last little bit of dynamics. I say the car grips well and it goes well. It has a perfect 50-50 weight distribution in the chassis and a very low centre of gravity because the way the batteries are all laid along the bottom of the car. So on paper, everything stacks up and you think, well, that's going to be quite something else. Over 200 horsepower, perfect weight distribution, you know, lowered chassis, everything just seems to be ticking all the boxes. Yet just, as I say, just out on the road, it's just that last few percentile that would make it great has dialed it back to being just good. That's how I can summarise it, really. But I do like it. I do like it. I think I possibly just maybe laid a lot of expectations at the door of the Cupra badge, and I kind of wanted something just a little bit more edgy, and I haven't quite got it. Now, pricing for the Born will depend obviously on the battery size and motor you go for. Let's just talk about this car that we have here, which is the 58 kilowatt hour car with the 204 PS motor. Now, you get it in 3 trim levels, either V1, V2 or V3. A V1 will come in at around about £33,700. Moving up to the V2, we'll need another few £100 to be just over the £34,000 bracket. If you want a V3 like this car, then it's going to be over £37,000. Now, none of those obviously will be applicable for the UK's plug-in car grant because they're well above its threshold. But as I say, remember, there's going to be a smaller battery, lower powered car coming in. Cupra are also at pains to point out that their finance packages will be very, very competitive on them as well, and they will also have class-leading residuals. So, depending obviously on trim level and battery you go for, will depend whether or not it ends up being good value for money or not. And in terms of competition, well, at the moment, really, there's just 2 protagonists, which is the Volkswagen ID.3, obviously on which this is based, and Citroen's EC4, because obviously most people have a love these days for crossovers and SUVs. But that's not to say that there's not more coming out, because Peugeot obviously will be coming onto the market very, very soon with their new 308, which they said is going to offer full electric drivetrain. And of course, its sister car from Stellantis, the new Vauxhall Astra, which will also, like its little sibling, the Corsa, be available with a fully electric drivetrain coming soon. So the 5-door family hatch isn't dead yet. So here's what we like and what we don't like about the new Cupra Born. We like its design, its interior design and quality, the use of sustainable materials, the option of different battery sizes and range depending on budget, and the better infotainment than the ID.3 on which it's based. We don't like some of the minor controls and touch sensitive buttons. Performance is only average on this 204 PS model, and the dynamics are not quite as good as Cupra's reputation may have you believe. So, what do we think of the new Cupra Born? Well, on the whole, I really like it. I love the way the car looks. I think it looks much better than the ID.3 on which it is based. I think it's very comfortable. The fit and finish inside is superior to the Volkswagens as well. Hashtag awkward. And on the whole, I love the fact that you've got the different power outputs and the different battery sizes depending obviously on your needs. So all of that is very, very good. Is it good enough, however? Is it good enough to wear that Cupra badge in the front? Nearly. It's frustrating because it's kind of nearly there. The dynamics you can feel are there, but it's just slightly hampered by something. It's not quite living up to the Cupra badge. It's good, it's just not the Born supremacy I was hoping it might be. Thank you once again for watching another episode of AutoEV, including my bad jokes. Remember, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel and press the little bell button down below to receive notification of when our next video goes live. If you could also leave us a bit of a thumbs up if you've liked the video, and maybe leave us some comments, good or bad, down below, because every little bit will help us. Now remember, we're on all social media platforms as well, so Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, so pop across there and give us a follow. And if you like what we do, then please stick on our YouTube channel, because we've got a back catalogue of road tests there, as well as an electric icons series as well, just waiting for your viewing pleasure. All that remains for me to say is thank you once again for putting up with me and my bad sense of humour. We'll see you again soon. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe, and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded.